My name is Jean-Yves Ambroise. I've been a customer success manager at EMnify for a year and a half now, and I am still with Brian Smith, who is a technical writer at EMnify.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for joining.
All right, so thanks a lot for the introduction. So I think you gave quite a good overview of what we're going to be covering. So in order to start exactly where we left off last time, I'm going to have a look at the EUI. So in this case, this is our success account that we use for testing. We have a couple of test sims in here. And in this tech settings page, you can access this by the link icon in the top right. You navigate here, and this is where our application tokens are. That's for API access. And what we're interested in is the data stream here. So this is the data streamer that we set up last time. And what we've done is we've set this to S3, and we're interested in event information. It's still running, and I can see that because I have a 200 status code. So we can head straight over to S3, and this is the bucket that we're sending it to. So it's this webinar EDS bucket, and we can see if we sort by last modified, we can see these CSV files that are being delivered to this bucket all the time. And these CSV files, we can open one up. They basically contain, here, so they contain event information. So here we only have one, but typically if there's a lot of activity on an account, the header here at the top tells you what the columns are, and then each row will tell you, would have the actual event details. So with an account that has a lot of activity on it, this would have hundreds or thousands of rows. So that's just an example of the file that's going in there, but that's not so useful to us to have to go and individually open each one up and try and see what's happening. So that's why we built this pipeline. So one of the things that we were interested in for this webinar was trying to build some example that realized when there was a new CSV file that landed in S3, and was interested in, okay, let's take a look and see if, is it any interesting event? Are we interested in receiving a notification? Is it something that's, like John mentioned, that's time critical? Is it something that I need to know about within 20 minutes or within 5 minutes or less than that? So we have, we've built a small demo example, and we'll explain why we have built it in that way. So just to bring it up, this is the general pattern. So we can go into why we've actually used this design pattern later on, but let's take a look at how we'd actually put that together. So one very handy thing that they've added to S3, if we head to the properties section, is there's a tab here down at the bottom called events. And actually, we can add a notification directly to S3 buckets. And here we can say, well, I'm interested in getting a notification at all objects create events, and that's every time something gets added to this bucket. And you can be a bit more specific with, okay, if it's in an images prefix or if it's in some other data or events prefix. Let's see, we can also send this directly to SNS or to a Lambda function. In our case, we're going to pick a Lambda function because we want to sort through the CSV. So the way we're delivering events to S3 at the moment is that we have a CSV file with potentially hundreds of events contained in each one. So each file will contain many events, and we first want to sort through them all. So in order to do that, what we can do, I've already set up a Lambda function. We can take a look at how it's built, but we should have it populated here. So what we're using at the moment is this S3 to SNS Lambda, and we can give it a name, webinar notification. Okay, so directly this activates a notification that a new object was created, and it will send that as a trigger to Lambda. So of course this Lambda already exists. We've made 3 for this purpose. And I can bring up this diagram again. So the first one that we're sending directly to is this S3 to SNS. And that's reading the CSV files and actually deciding which service we want to send a notification to. So we can take a look. So first you have to make sure that the permissions are set so that we can actually read from S3, publish to SNS, and we can see the trigger is already there when we've added this event notification from the bucket. This is our Python code that's actually grabbing the CSV file. And we are going to share this with you. So if you want to, you can grab this directly. I've made these available on GitHub. So you can grab a copy of this if you want to. This is public at the moment, but we'll share the link with you. And you can paste this directly in. So this should get you quite far. So what we're doing is when we get an event notification that some new CSV file is added, we're just grabbing the latest object. And in our case, it's a CSV. And for every row, when that means in every event, I'm interested in, for this example, I'm interested in these 3 properties, and that's the description of the event and the endpoint name and the endpoint ID. So I can grab these from the row directly. Of course, if you're interested in some other types of events, that's up to your use case. You might be interested in SIM suspension, or you might be interested in the severity of the event, or there's a lot of different properties for you to decide. It's up to you to make the decision of what exactly is important. But here we want to grab the event type description, and we want to check, is it suspended or is it activated? And based on that, we're going to either publish to Slack or email. And then we actually publish to these topics. So this is really where most of the hard work of the whole tool chain, or I would say this pipeline, that's basically all, the most complicated part, where we're reading this CSV file and we're deciding where do we want to send it. I mean, it's possible for sure to directly have your email and Slack logic in this Lambda, but in our case, it's just a bit simpler if we separate out the logic. Okay, so now we can head over to SNS. And we have 2 topics which we've referenced in this Lambda, and that's this Slack notification and an email notification. The reason why these are handy is because a Lambda itself can actually subscribe. So let's have a look at our SNS to email Lambda first. And basically what happens, this one's written in Python as well, and you can grab the code example from GitHub as well. We'll share it with you. So what happens is we're grabbing the event, we're grabbing the SNS message, and we're just placing it into a template and then sending this on using the SES service. So if we have a quick look at the other worker Lambda, which is this guy, we're triggering the email notification when we have activation in the event description. So we can actually trigger that at the moment and see if that works. So a nice way in the platform that we tried from last time of generating events was by resetting connectivity. So this is a nice way to check if my events are being sent directly to S3 first, and then if my Lambda is being triggered. So we can do a reset connectivity on this endpoint. and my SNS to email Lambda should be triggered. So let's take a look. This might take a second here, but here. So we can see the end product is our SIM activation email that's using a nice template with some proper formatting, and we have extracted the information that we're interested in. So we're replacing the event description, the endpoint name, and the endpoint ID into our template. And basically, we're giving someone an actionable email that happens quite quickly. Okay, if I'm interested in seeing this endpoint, I can click on this link and I can go directly to the platform, and I land up on this OnePlus device that Jean-Eudes has been using for testing. So this is a quick way of sending some emails. So of course, Jean-Eudes mentioned that the reason why we're using this Lambda here at the beginning to sort between the SNS and the Slack, we could have all of our logic directly in this, the first Lambda. We could have our SES logic and the SNS logic directly in there. But having too much, having a one worker function doing too much, it makes it a little bit slow. It might be running quite a lot. And it's generally a good idea to just have some generic function where, okay, I just have an SES function that sends out an email, and I have another SNS function that just delivers a Slack webhook. So one good point that Jean-Eudes mentioned was about filtering. So I don't want my Lambda functions to be running all the time on events that I'm not interested in. So how would I do that? Well, the idea is to add filtering at lots of different levels. So first of all, we can add filtering here, which is directly on the EMnify Data Streamer side. We can then add filtering in this worker Lambda, which is what we're doing. We're interested in this SIM suspension or SIM activation. So the idea is that we want our resources to be working as little as possible. Okay, so how do we set up filtering on the EUI side? Well, if we go to our data streamer, we have this option here to pause and also to filter. So we can click on the data streamer and filter by event types. So I'm interested in this case in SIM activation, SIM suspension, and delete PDP context maybe. So that means that this is more like a whitelist that only those event types will be sent to S3. And that means that my AWS services will be working less. I'm only receiving the events that I'm interested in. Okay, so that was the SNS Lambda and the email Lambda. So there's one more that we can take a look at, which is to build a Slack notification. This one's also available on GitHub, so you can copy this one and get it up and running with your own Slack workspace if you want. So what's happening here? So from our router Lambda that's saying, okay, I want to send this SNS message to my Slack worker, I just read the event, check the message, and then I create this post data, which I select, okay, what channel I want to send it to. I can do some formatting on it in the same way that I format the email. And we have a webhook. This is quite easy in Slack to set up. It's called an incoming webhook, and it takes about 2 minutes. You generate a URL, and you can post this directly in here. And we can try this out using the same logic. So we're sending endpoint SIM suspension, I believe, to Slack. So let's give that a try now. We can also trigger this by API using the reset connectivity. So reset connectivity will disable and re-enable the SIM. And we can see in Slack, we already have this desktop notification here telling you that it's working. And here, so we have SIM suspension notification and delete PDP context. So let's see. So here's our formatted event. So this basically looks like an app integration. And we're using the similar kind of formatting as we do in the emails, where we have a subject, we have a main message. This is, they call this an attachment. And then we're generating a link at the end. We're saying if you want to view this event in the browser, you can click on this one, and we should land on the endpoint that we're interested in. So that's a very efficient way of setting up some notifications. So of course, it depends on what your use case is, how much data that you're actually filtering through, what kind of events that you're interested in filtering for. And if I say, okay, I'm interested in quota-related events, then I want to send a publication to this particular SNS topic, and I can very quickly build a couple of other very small and efficient lambdas that do exactly what I want. So if there's any questions about how we've set this up so far, you can please paste them into the questions box. Of course, we've already had a look at the email section. One good place to look at also on our API documentation, we have a list of different events and the details that you can get from the Data Streamer events there.
And also, I mean, we have recorded the webinar, but this step-by-step email notification service will be published in form of a knowledge base article with all the links to GitHub to get the code. And if you need to customize this for your own needs, this will be possible. And if you need help, let us know.
So of course, one of the questions that Jean-Eudes had was, why don't we put all of our logic in this first Lambda here? And part of the problem was that, okay, we can also trigger SES directly from our first Lambda, but we don't have very nice looking templates. So I think this pattern will work in a bit more of a scalable way, where you have these SNS topics that we can route to. I mean, here we have a generic Lambda that we can also trigger from any other service that sends an email. We have a Slack Lambda that we can trigger from any other service, not just from EDS, but maybe you want to use it for some other service. So I think this is quite a flexible way to do it. I'm very curious to see what you build with it, and I hope that you have some fun with it. If there's any questions, then please feel free to ask. We have some time for a Q&A session if anyone has any questions about how all of the pieces come together. And again, so the GitHub gists are available here, and we're going to be sharing them on our knowledge base. And there you can grab the JavaScript code if you prefer to write in JavaScript, but also there's some Python snippets that you can directly paste in for your Lambdas, which should get you up and running. I think if you paste these through and have the permission set up, you should be ready in 15-20 minutes. I think this is a very quick integration, and depending on what your needs are. If you were building something where maybe someone wanted to have preferences for where you wanted to save your preferences, hey, I don't want to receive emails on this kind of event anymore. Maybe you would have to build something with a database in there. But for the moment, if you're just using this for your own organization, if you're managing the emails themselves, this is a pretty good solution. So one thing to notice, if you're using SES, that you have to verify the emails that you're sending from. But that's one of the steps that you have to eventually, if you're going to be using this for commercial purposes, you have to, I believe it's take the accounts out of sandbox mode. But straight out of the box, if you have some verified email accounts that you have with the service, you can use these examples straight away.